Massage therapists, are you looking to enhance your skills and improve your practice? Here's your chance. The American Massage Conference is back. This 3-day event will be at Disney Springs in Orlando, May 16th to 18th, and kicks off with Free Friday, which is open to everyone. The weekend has over 20 educators offering approved continuing education and a tribute to the late, great Eric Dalton, as well as nightly cocktail receptions to network and unwind. Head over to massagetherapymedia.com/conferences to secure your pass and join us in connecting therapists globally.
Anatomy Trains is thrilled to invite you to our 2025 summer program on the coast of Maine, featuring courses for both manual therapists and movement professionals. Instructors include Tom Myers, Till Luka, Wojtek Satskovsky, and Sharon Wheeler. Come for the world-class education and stay for a vacation on one of the most beautiful coastlines in the country. Visit anatomytrains.com for details.
The endocrine system is my favorite of all the systems. Probably, to be honest, if you ask me on any other given day about any other given system, I'll tell you why that one is my favorite. But also, the endocrine system is, in my opinion, the most difficult one to really grasp, and I love a good challenge. The endocrine system is a collection of organs and glands scattered throughout the body with seemingly no organization. It produces chemicals called hormones that cannot be dissected or palpated, which makes them effectively mysterious. And the fact that they control so much of who we are is mind-blowing. Hormones are magic. Not really, but I happen to think that magic and science are interrelated. More so that science is the process of understanding magic, but of all the systems in the body, this one is the most influential in ways that are overarching and commonly non-linear. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't even count the number of times I have felt like, for no reason, I want to eat a bag of chips and a bucket of ice cream and, after 55 years on this planet, still forget that hormones are driving that train. Learning about the endocrine system is often a practice in rote memorization. Which gland secretes which hormone, which then triggers which other gland to trigger what other hormones that regulate what imbalance in our physiology. And these are good to know, but this episode is not about that. Thankfully, that would be a really boring episode if it was. My focus today is specifically on the hormones adrenaline and cortisol, and their role in stress, of course, but more so about their role in soft tissue health. Having been a bodyworker for over 25 years, I see, as I'm sure you do as well, on a very regular basis, the effect these hormones have on soft tissue and the toll they can take if not addressed properly. In other words, the direct relationship stress has on the function of our muscle and connective tissue is real. And I'm going to break it down for you. Adrenaline and cortisol are known as the fight or flight and stress hormones. You probably know adrenaline well if you have ever been in a car accident or had to speak in public or have been on a first date or basically if you're human. It's that internal heat and energy rush that seems to completely change your existence in the world for a solid handful of minutes. You probably also know cortisol but didn't know you knew it. It's more understated, takes hold over time, and presents as headaches, weight gain, and irritability, so also just being human. Before I dive into the specifics, though, I want to highlight that the way the endocrine system affects connective tissue is complicated and varies so greatly from person to person that it is often quite difficult for a massage therapist to understand, much less for a client to be able to describe. We know it, we can feel it, and I want you to be able to talk about it. This analogy might be helpful. I heard it recently and thought it too good not to share. Adrenaline and cortisol, two of the bigger players in the endocrine universe, work as a tag team in a war. While adrenaline acts immediately to hand out the ammunition, cortisol slowly builds up the armor to protect that which is possibly threatened. Possibly is a key word here. The war can be very real, and the threat of war is equally as destructive. Adrenaline, famously known as the fight or flight hormone, is triggered under both real and perceived threats. Cortisol, famously known as the stress hormone, is triggered by elevated amounts of adrenaline. So while adrenaline is making sure we are armed and ready to go, and cortisol is building walls, our other systems are also reacting. This is a good thing, but too much of a good thing becomes not a good thing. More specifically, without getting too technical, here's the basic chain of events. Something happens. And this can be a whole lot of somethings. A physical trauma, like a bee sting, a mental or emotional trauma, like a work confrontation, or a perceived trauma, like believing the sky is going to fall at any moment. So this something happens, and the hypothalamus, a gland residing deep in the brain directly above the brainstem, also known as the master gland, releases a hormone called CRH, or corticotropin-releasing hormone. It is responsible for, drumroll please, releasing cortisol. So, CRH enters the bloodstream and floats along until it eventually finds its way down to the kidneys, where, very conveniently living just on top of the kidneys, are the adrenals. Yep, directly adjacent to the renals is where you'll find the adrenals. Once the adrenals receive the signal from CRH that it's go time, adrenaline, and therefore also cortisol, are released into the blood because, well, if the sky is falling, you are definitely going to need to be prepared. Cortisol, once released, then finds its way to the liver and adipose tissue and pulls stored sugars and fatty acids in order to provide some nutrition for ATP synthesis. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, if you remember from school, is the primary source for muscle contractions, or more simply put, cortisol grabs the foundations needed to build power and protection. But here's the kicker. Well, two kickers really. Kicker number one, if the mind thinks the sky is going to fall, but it doesn't ever really fall, corticotropin-releasing hormone is still being released, setting forth and gearing up for a fight. The body then, never really activating fight mode, doesn't use that newly accessed stored sugar floating around in the bloodstream because the sky isn't really falling. Second kicker, the thing about cortisol is it is one of the few elements that can cross the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier, aptly named as it is a protective barrier around the brain regulated by cerebral blood vessels, allows only certain substances to pass through. Glucocorticoids are one of these. The issue then is that cortisol binds to the receptors in the brain, and high levels of cortisol can, over time, impair memory, impede thinking skills, and can play a role in emotional experiences. This series of responses can, as you can imagine, create more stress for the owner of said brain and said cortisol, which can then trigger the release of more CRH, which then triggers more adrenaline, and so on. Disclaimer, there is a lot more to it than this, and there are always more factors influencing how these processes act, but the general idea that stress can and often does produce a negative downward spiral of chemical events has been researched and proven scientifically. In the meantime, connective tissue is having its own relationship with this chain of events. ATP, as I mentioned earlier, has been nourished, and muscle tissue, like a horse at the gate, is itching to go. Connective tissue, lingering and hanging out at all those gates, is picking up what that muscle tissue is putting down. In this scenario, connective tissue acts like an overzealous group of superheroes. Its main job is to protect and to connect. It is thinking, okay, so there is something coming, something on the horizon. The sky is going to fall. So it gathers itself up, binds to create a resistance, and grows thicker and stronger. This is what connective tissue is supposed to do. It is very superhero-like. As a matter of fact, physiologically, connective tissue has been known to move towards dysfunction. Like, remember in my episode about the greater omentum, I highlighted how surgeons have found greater omentums to have moved across abdomens towards the presence of, say, colitis or appendicitis in an effort to help? Well, it's kind of like that, just in smaller doses and not as easy to observe. A trigger point, for example, a massage therapist's most commonly seen dysfunction, is the distressed cry of a small bundle of muscle fibers. And the restless superheroes, in the form of fascia, surrounding that trigger point starts to thicken, and in an overexerted and underregulated effort to protect it, begins locking it down. The pickle arises when adrenaline and cortisol are constantly at war against a never-ending stream of perceived threats, and connective tissue has teamed up with cortisol to offer the raw goods for that wall of armor it's building. Soft tissue at this point can begin to shut down. While it's funny to think about pickles and overzealous superheroes and tag teams living their lives underneath your skin, remember that your physiology is not personified. Offering up analogies of how anatomy operates for the persons who own them is helpful to gain a better understanding, But your endocrine system does not have its own nervous system with an enlarged amygdala that experiences fear. These processes are neither good nor bad. They're not malicious, nor are they empowering. They just are. And this is important because we, us, our clients, all of us, often take pain signals as a sign that we are doing something wrong. Sometimes it does indicate that we are, in fact, doing something that is not productive, but sometimes it can indicate that we are pushing a barrier that will help us grow stronger. In the same way that sometimes feeling good can be perceived as being on the right track, but sometimes it is an indicator that we are in the comfort zone and therefore not growing. Stress is a thing that exists. Some people feel stress and collapse under it. Some people tackle it head on and rise to the occasion. Some people do both, and some people spend a lot of time and energy avoiding stress altogether. Adrenaline and cortisol may be associated with negative responses, but they are not bad components to who we are. There are just a lot more factors involved with how these land inside ourselves. Soft tissue health is our goal. Trigger points and adhesions don't always form because of overuse or misuse. Sometimes they form because some catalyst sets the events in motion, but they never got checked or balanced, and they went too far and got out of control. In this case, it might be fruitful to push past the pain response and reintroduce cooperation. As a bodyworker, knowing how to listen to who your client is and what they are saying is fundamental. Sometimes pressure and intense work incites a negative reaction, and they are not ready. But sometimes it indicates that you are on the right path, and encouraging them to move through is the best approach. There is no blanket statement on when to ease up and when to lean in, but there is communication and there is time. While building walls can feel safe and necessary, breaking down walls that have become too thick can be equally as important. Neither is good or bad. They can both hurt and they can both feel amazing. All of this to say, we are holistic practitioners. There is balance in varied approaches. There is good stress and bad. And being patient with that process with your client will offer more insights than you can imagine.